how did you use an Uno reverse to turn your family's rules upside down? Growing up in the Blackwood house meant following one sacred rule: family business stays in the family. No exceptions, no outsiders, no authorities. When Dad got arrested for tax evasion, we told neighbors he was on a business trip. When Uncle Garrett was caught embezzling from his law firm, we claimed he was taking a sabbatical. When my older brother Zane started dealing drugs from our basement, Mom served cookies to the police and said he was at college. The family code was simple: blood protects blood, even when blood is poison. I bought into it completely until I was 17 and discovered what my cousin Freya had been hiding. She lived with us after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. Freya was quiet, artistic, and spent most of her time locked in the attic bedroom Mom had converted for her. We all thought she was just grieving. Even 5 years later, she barely spoke at family dinners and flinched whenever Uncle Garrett visited. One afternoon, I went to borrow her art supplies and found her crying over a canvas. But it wasn't sadness, it was terror. The painting showed a man's silhouette in a doorway, looming over a small figure cowering on a bed. The brushstrokes were violent, desperate. "Freya, what is this?" She spun around, eyes wide with panic. "Nothing. It's just abstract art." But I'd seen that doorway before. It was the entrance to her room. That night, I heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, deliberate steps that stopped outside Freya's door. Then came the soft click of a lock turning. I crept to my doorway and saw Uncle Garrett slipping inside her room with a key. My stomach dropped. For weeks, I gathered evidence. I recorded the footsteps with my phone. I documented when he visited and when Freya would disappear for hours afterward, returning with red eyes and shaking hands. I found the spare key he'd hidden behind the hallway portrait. When I finally confronted Freya, she broke down completely. "You can't tell anyone," she sobbed. "It'll destroy the family. Uncle Garrett said if I ever told, he'd make sure I ended up in foster care. He said no one would believe me anyway." The family code was protecting a monster. That's when I decided to flip the script entirely. I waited until Thanksgiving, when the entire extended family gathered for dinner. 23 relatives crammed into our dining room, all gossiping and laughing while Freya sat silent and pale beside Uncle Garrett. During dessert, I stood up with my phone in hand. "I'd like to propose a toast," I announced, "to family traditions." Everyone raised their glasses, smiling. "Specifically, to our tradition of protecting family secrets." Uncle Garrett's face went white. I pressed play on the recording. His voice filled the room, clear as day, whispering threats to Freya through her bedroom door just 3 nights earlier. The silence was deafening. "Our family code says blood protects blood," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "So I'm protecting Freya from him." Uncle Garrett lunged toward me, but my brother Zane, surprisingly, blocked his path. "Sit down, Garrett," Zane said quietly. That's when I realized someone else had been listening outside Freya's door too. Uncle Garrett tried to play innocent, claiming the recording was fake, but I had more evidence. Photos of the spare key, Freya's paintings, documentation of his late-night visits. The family split instantly. Half wanted to handle it internally, quietly transfer Uncle Garrett somewhere else, maybe therapy, keep it hushed. The other half wanted him gone completely, but I wasn't done. "There's something else," I said, pulling out a second phone. "I've been documenting everything for months, and I've already sent copies to Detective Morrison." The room erupted. Mom grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. "You called the police? On family?" "I protected family," I shot back. "Just not the family you wanted me to protect." That's when Uncle Garrett smiled, cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you've just done," he said softly. "I know things about this family that would destroy all of you, and now I have nothing left to lose." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even the relatives who'd been shouting fell silent. Something in Uncle Garrett's tone promised devastation. Aunt Helene, Dad's sister, stepped forward. "Garrett, don't what?" He cut her off, that same terrifying smile spreading across his face. "Don't tell them about the insurance money. Don't mention how Freya's parents really died." Freya's face went ashen. "What are you talking about?" Uncle Garrett laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Sweet, naive Freya. Did you really think that car accident was random?" My blood turned to ice. Around the table, relatives exchanged glances that told me some of them already knew what he was about to reveal. "Your father was going to leave the family business," Uncle Garrett continued, his voice gaining momentum. "He'd discovered some irregularities in the books. He was threatening to go to the authorities." Grandpa Blackwood, who'd been silent in his wheelchair at the head of the table, suddenly spoke up. "Garrett, that's enough. No, Pops. It's time everyone knew the truth about our precious family loyalty." He turned back to Freya, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Your parents' brake lines were cut. Your father's death wasn't an accident, it was a murder." The words hit the room like a bomb. Freya's chair clattered backward as she stood, stumbling toward the wall. "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I?" Uncle Garrett pulled out his own phone. "I've been keeping insurance policies of my own. Photos, documents, recorded conversations. Did you know your grandfather ordered the hit? That your Uncle Thomas actually did the dirty work?" Uncle Thomas, who'd been standing by the fireplace, suddenly bolted for the door. Dad tackled him before he could reach it, and they crashed into the china cabinet. Glass exploded everywhere. "Stop!" Mom screamed, but chaos had already erupted. Cousin Marlene was sobbing hysterically. Aunt Diane grabbed her purse and started backing toward the exit. 3 of my younger cousins huddled together, wide-eyed and terrified. Through it all, Uncle Garrett kept talking, his voice rising above the mayhem. "That's not even the best part," he shouted. "Tell them about the money laundering, Pops. Tell them about the judges you've been bribing. Tell them about the witness who disappeared before Thomas's DUI trial. I looked at Freya, who was pressed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't what I'd wanted. I'd thought I was exposing one monster, but apparently I'd uncovered a whole nest of them. Grandpa Blackwood's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Enough! Everyone froze. Even at 83, confined to a wheelchair, he commanded absolute authority in this family. Garrett, he said quietly, you've crossed a line. Uncle Garrett's triumphant expression faltered slightly. I've crossed a line? I'm not the one who's been. You've been stealing from the family for 3 years, Grandpa continued, his voice deadly calm. You've been using your access to our legal matters to line your own pockets, and now you're trying to destroy us all to save yourself. The room went silent again. Uncle Garrett's face cycled through several emotions: surprise, fear, and finally, desperate rage. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice wavered. Zane stepped forward, and I noticed he was holding a thick manila envelope. Actually, we can, he said. I've been watching you too, Garrett. The money you skimmed from Freya's inheritance, the false billings, the forged documents. I stared at my brother in shock. When had he become the responsible one? You see, Zane continued, while you were busy being a predator, I was learning the family business, really learning it, including how to spot when someone's stealing from us. Uncle Garrett's face went from red to white to purple. You little shit, you have no idea what you're dealing with. But I do, a new voice said from the doorway. Detective Morrison stepped into the dining room, followed by 3 uniformed officers. I'd called him after exposing Uncle Garrett, but I hadn't expected him to show up during dinner. The sight of badges and handcuffs in our family dining room felt surreal. Garrett Blackwood, Detective Morrison said, you're under arrest for the sexual assault of a minor. As they cuffed Uncle Garrett, he twisted around to face me, his eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, he snarled. You think you're protecting her? You've just painted a target on both your backs. There are things about this family you still don't know, and people who won't let those secrets die with me. The officers dragged him away, but his words echoed in my mind long after the front door slammed shut. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Half the relatives left that night and never came back. Aunt Helene moved to Oregon the next week. Cousin Marlene's family cut all contact, afraid they'd be implicated in whatever Uncle Garrett might reveal during his trial. The ones who stayed split into 2 camps, those who blamed me for destroying the family, and those who finally understood that the family had been rotten long before I'd exposed it. But the worst part was watching Freya. Learning that her parents' death wasn't an accident broke something inside her that I wasn't sure could be fixed. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped painting. The vibrant, artistic girl who'd hidden her trauma behind creativity became a ghost drifting through our house. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I found her in the bathroom with a bottle of Mom's sleeping pills. I can't do this anymore, she whispered when I took the pills away. Everyone I love dies because of this family. First my parents, and now, what if they come after you too? I held her while she cried, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. The first hearing was scheduled for December 15th. Uncle Garrett pled not guilty and hired the most expensive defense attorney in the state. His strategy became clear immediately. If he was going down, he was taking everyone with him. His lawyer subpoenaed financial records going back 20 years. They demanded testimonies from every family member. They started investigating Freya's parents' car accident. Mom came to me a week before the hearing, her face haggard. We need to talk, she said. We sat in the kitchen where I'd confronted her about protecting Uncle Garrett just weeks earlier. It felt like years had passed. There are things about this family you don't understand, she began. Your grandfather, he's not just a businessman. The Blackwood name carries weight in this town for reasons that go beyond legitimate success. My stomach clenched. What are you saying? I'm saying that if Garrett starts talking, it won't just be him going to prison. Your father could be arrested. Zane could be arrested. Hell, I could be arrested. She pulled out a folder and spread its contents across the table. Bank statements, legal documents, photographs. The family business isn't just construction and real estate, she continued. We launder money for some very dangerous people. We've been doing it for decades. The judges, the police officials, the city council members, they're all on our payroll. I stared at the evidence in front of me, my world tilting sideways. Freya's father discovered this, Mom said quietly. He was going to expose everything, so Grandpa had him killed. The words hit me like a physical blow. And you're telling me this now because Garrett's lawyer is going to use all of this to create reasonable doubt. He's going to argue that Garrett was being set up by a family of criminals who needed a scapegoat. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. How long have you known? I asked. About the money laundering? Since I married your father? About Freya's parents? I suspected, but I didn't know for sure until tonight. And about what Garrett was doing to Freya? Mom's face crumpled. I swear I didn't know. If I had, you would have what? Called the police? We both know that's not how this family works. The silence stretched between us, filled with 20 years of lies and secrets. So what happens now? I finally asked. Now you have a choice, Mom said. You can testify against Garrett and watch our entire family implode, or you can find another way. What other way? She met my eyes, and I saw something cold and calculating there that reminded me of Grandpa. Garrett dies before he can testify. I stared at her in horror. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about protecting this family. The same thing you thought you were doing when you exposed him. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. I'm not a killer, Mom. No, she said quietly, but your grandfather is. And if you don't find another solution, that's exactly what's going to happen. I walked out of the kitchen and straight to Freya's room. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the December snow. We need to leave, I said without preamble. She turned to me, her eyes hollow. What? This family is never going to let us be free. They'll either kill Uncle Garrett to protect their secrets, or they'll kill us to protect themselves. We need to disappear. Freya shook her head slowly. I can't run forever. You won't have to. We'll run until we're strong enough to fight back. That night, I made a plan. I had $3,000 in savings and access to Mom's emergency credit card. Freya had a small inheritance from her grandmother that the family hadn't touched. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get us out of town. More importantly, I had copies of everything. The recordings of Uncle Garrett, the financial documents Mom had shown me, photos of the evidence Zane had compiled. If this family wanted to play dirty, I'd show them exactly how dirty things could get. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I researched cities where we could disappear, youth shelters that would help us, legal aid organizations that specialized in cases like ours. But as I was finalizing our escape plan, Zane cornered me in my room. I know what you're thinking, he said, closing the door behind him. Do you? You're going to run, take Freya and disappear. He sat down on my bed looking older than his 19 years. It won't work. Why not? Because Grandpa has connections everywhere. Private investigators, police contacts, people who owe him favors. He'll find you within a month. I sank into my desk chair, feeling defeated. So what do you suggest? Let them kill Uncle Garrett and pretend this never happened? No, Zane said quietly. I suggest we burn it all down. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, for the first time in years. The drug dealer who'd seemed like just another family screw-up was gone. In his place sat someone with sharp eyes and a calculating expression that reminded me uncomfortably of Grandpa. What are you talking about? Zane pulled out his phone and showed me a recording app. I've been documenting everything for the past year, he said. Every illegal transaction, every bribe, every threat. I've got Grandpa on tape ordering surveillance on people who cross him. I've got Dad discussing money laundering strategies. I've got Aunt Helen admitting she helped cover up the car accident. My mind reeled. Why? Because I knew this day would come. The Blackwood family empire was built on violence and corruption, and it was always going to collapse eventually. I just wanted to make sure I was on the right side when it happened. He showed me file after file on his phone, audio recordings, video clips, photographs of documents. The thing is, he continued, taking down the family isn't enough. The people they work with, the network of corruption they've built, it all needs to be exposed. Otherwise, someone else will just take our place. I stared at the evidence in front of me. This could destroy hundreds of people. Good. They deserve to be destroyed. And our family? Zane met my eyes. Our family stopped being a family the day they decided protecting their wealth was more important than protecting their children. That night, I called Detective Morrison. I have more evidence, I told him. A lot more. We met the next morning at a coffee shop across town. I brought Zane and everything we'd compiled. Detective Morrison brought a federal agent named Special Agent Rivera. What you're describing, Agent Rivera said after reviewing our materials, is a RICO case. Racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, murder for hire. We're talking about bringing down an entire criminal organization. How long would it take? I asked. To build a case this size? At least a year, maybe 2. And in the meantime, Detective Morrison answered, in the meantime, you and Freya are in serious danger. If your grandfather suspects what you're planning, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Agent Rivera leaned forward. We can offer you protection, witness protection, new identities, relocation, the works. I thought about Freya, barely holding herself together in the aftermath of Uncle Garrett's arrest. I thought about leaving behind everything we'd ever known. What about Uncle Garrett's trial? If you cooperate with our investigation, his trial becomes the least of your worries, Agent Rivera said. We'll have enough evidence to put him away for life without relying on a he said, she said case about sexual assault. And my family? Detective Morrison's expression was grim. Your family will be facing federal charges. Most of them will probably spend the rest of their lives in prison. I closed my eyes, thinking about Mom making Christmas cookies, Dad teaching me to drive, Grandpa telling stories about the old days. All of it had been built on lies and blood money. Okay, I said finally. Let's do it. The next 18 months were the strangest of my life. Freya and I were relocated to a small town in Montana while the federal investigation proceeded. We lived in a safe house under assumed names, with regular check-ins from our handlers and strict rules about who we could contact. Freya started therapy with a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery. Slowly, gradually, she began to heal. She started painting again. Not the violent, desperate canvases of her abuse, but softer pieces that spoke of hope and resilience. I finished high school through a GED program and started taking community college classes. For the first time in my life, I could imagine a future that didn't revolve around family loyalty and keeping secrets. But the hardest part was the isolation. We couldn't contact friends, couldn't use social media, couldn't even call our relatives to let them know we were alive. As far as the world knew, Freya and I had simply vanished after Uncle Garrett's arrest. The updates from Agent Rivera came sporadically. Arrests had been made. Grand juries had been convened. The investigation was proceeding, but slowly. Then, one day in June, she called with different news. Garrett's dead, she said without preamble. My stomach dropped. How? Suicide in his cell, according to the medical examiner, but the timing is suspicious. Uncle Garrett had been scheduled to cooperate with the federal investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. His death meant losing a key witness and potentially derailing months of work. Was it really suicide? I asked. Agent Rivera was quiet for a long moment. Let's just say your grandfather has a very long reach. That night, I sat with Freya on the porch of our safe house, watching the Montana sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. It's never going to be over, is it? She asked quietly. I wanted to reassure her, to promise that justice would prevail and we'd eventually be safe. But Uncle Garrett's death had shattered my faith in the system's ability to protect us. Maybe not, I admitted. But we're not the same people we were 18 months ago. She turned to look at me. What do you mean? I mean, we're not victims anymore. We know the truth about our family, about what they're capable of, and we have evidence that could destroy them. But the federal case is about justice for everyone they've hurt over the years. But this is personal. Freya studied my face in the fading light. What are you thinking? I pulled out my phone and showed her the contacts list. Over the past year, I'd been quietly reaching out to other victims of the Blackwood family network, people who'd been cheated, threatened, or worse. I'm thinking it's time to stop hiding, I said. Uncle Garrett was just one piece of this, but there are other pieces, other people who deserve to be exposed. That sounds dangerous. Everything we've done has been dangerous. The difference is, now we're choosing the danger instead of having it chosen for us. The federal investigation culminated 8 months later with a series of coordinated arrests across 3 states. Grandpa Blackwood, my father, and 12 other family members were charged with racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and a dozen other felonies. But by then, Freya and I were already implementing our own plan. Using the evidence we'd compiled and the contacts I'd made, we'd built a network of whistleblowers, journalists, and activists dedicated to exposing corruption in small-town America. We called it the Blackwood Project, named after the family that had taught us how deep corruption could run. Our first major success came when we helped expose a city council in Ohio that had been taking bribes for construction contracts. 3 officials resigned in disgrace, and the mayor was arrested. The second was a police department in Nevada, where officers had been covering up domestic violence cases in exchange for political support. 7 cops lost their badges, and the chief was charged with obstruction of justice. Each victory felt like a small piece of justice for what our family had done to us and to countless others. But the real test came when we decided to go public with our own story. I'll never forget walking into that television studio in Denver, sitting across from an investigative journalist named Patricia Lang, and telling the world about the Blackwood family. Why are you speaking out now? She asked during the interview. I looked directly into the camera, thinking about Uncle Garrett, about Freya's parents, about all the people who'd been hurt by my family's code of silence. Because secrets are poison, I said. They rot everything they touch. The only way to stop the rot is to expose it to light. The interview aired on a Tuesday night in October. By Wednesday morning, my phone was ringing nonstop with calls from other survivors, other families who'd been destroyed by corruption and silence. By Friday, 3 more cities had opened investigations into their own police departments and city councils. By the following month, the Blackwood Project had expanded to include offices in 12 states. But the call that mattered most came 6 months later from Mom. I saw your interview, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I'd left Montana and come out of witness protection. Part of me had wondered if I'd ever hear from her again. And I wanted you to know that you were right. About all of it. She was calling from a payphone outside the federal prison where she was serving her sentence. She'd pled guilty to money laundering and received 8 years. Your father wanted to fight the charges, she continued. He said the family would find a way to beat this, just like we always had. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that what we'd done was okay. What changed your mind? You did. Seeing you choose to protect Freya over protecting the family. It made me realize how long it had been since I'd chosen to protect anyone. We talked for an hour. She told me about her life in prison, about the other women she'd met who'd made similar choices to protect their family's secrets. She asked about Freya, about our work with the Blackwood Project. I'm proud of you, she said before hanging up. I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but I wanted you to know. After she hung up, I sat in my office, a real office, with my name on the door and a view of the mountains, and thought about the reverse that had started it all. I thought I was just protecting one person from one monster. I'd had no idea that I was actually dismantling an entire system of abuse that had been generations in the making. The family code that had defined my childhood, blood protects blood, had been built on the assumption that family was worth protecting regardless of what they'd done. But I'd learned something different. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about the people you'd risk everything to protect, and the people who'd risk everything to protect you. Freya walked into my office as I was finishing up some paperwork. She'd just returned from testifying in a case in California where our evidence had helped expose a city council's embezzlement scheme. How did it go? I asked. 3 convictions, she said with satisfaction. And 2 more cities have reached out asking for our help. She sat down across from my desk, and I marveled at the transformation. The terrified, broken girl who'd been painting her trauma in our attic bedroom had become a fierce advocate for other survivors. I've been thinking about something, she said. What's that? Uncle Garrett was right about one thing. I did have no idea what I was doing when I called the police that night. I looked up from my paperwork. And now? She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. Now I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm just getting started. 5 years later, the Blackwood Project had helped expose corruption in over 200 communities across the United States. We'd assisted in dozens of prosecutions, supported hundreds of whistleblowers, and helped pass legislation making it easier for victims to come forward. But the work that mattered most to me was personal. Freya had started a foundation providing therapy and legal support to children who'd been abused by family members. She'd testified before Congress about the need for better protection for victims of familial abuse. And me? I'd found my calling in investigative journalism, specializing in exposing the kind of small-town corruption that had defined my childhood. The Blackwood family name, which had once opened doors and commanded respect, had become synonymous with everything that was wrong with unchecked power. Grandpa died in federal prison 3 years into his sentence. Dad was still serving his time, with a release date that wouldn't come until I was in my 30s. Most of the extended family had scattered, changing their names and trying to rebuild their lives away from the wreckage. But Zane had surprised everyone. He'd cooperated fully with the federal investigation, serving only 18 months in minimum security prison. When he got out, he'd started a non-profit organization helping formerly incarcerated people find jobs and housing. "I spent my whole life learning how to be a criminal," he told me during one of our monthly phone calls. "Figured I should spend the rest of it learning how to be something else." The conversation I'd been dreading came on a cold February morning when Agent Rivera called to tell me that Uncle Thomas, the one who'd actually cut the brake lines on Freya's parents' car, had been found dead in his cell. "Another suicide?" I asked. "This one was real," she said. "Left a full confession, detailed description of how your grandfather ordered the hit and how he carried it out." I called Freya immediately. She'd been dreading this moment, the final confirmation that her parents' death hadn't been a random tragedy, but a calculated murder. She was quiet for a long time after I told her. "How do you feel?" I finally asked. "Empty," she said. "I thought I'd feel angry or sad or something, but mostly I just feel empty." "That's okay too. Is it weird that I'm grateful he killed himself? That I don't have to see him in court or listen to him explain why my parents had to die?" "No," I said. "It's not weird at all." That night, we held a memorial service for her parents. Just the two of us, in the small garden behind Freya's house, with candles and flowers, and the painting she'd made of them before they died. "They would have been proud of you," I told her as we watched the candles flicker in the darkness. "You think so?" "I know so. You became exactly the kind of person they wanted you to be, despite everything our family did to try to stop you." She smiled through her tears. We both did. The strangest part of our new life was how normal it had become. We had jobs, friends, relationships, all the things that had seemed impossible during those dark years in the Blackwood house. Freya was dating a social worker named Camden, who understood her trauma and supported her advocacy work. I'd been seeing a fellow journalist named Quinn for 2 years, and we'd started talking about moving in together. Sometimes I'd catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for some hidden Blackwood family connection to emerge and threaten our carefully constructed peace. But as the years passed, those fears faded. The family code that had once controlled every aspect of our lives had been broken, and we'd built something better in its place. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday in March, 6 years after Uncle Garrett's arrest. "There's something you need to know," Detective Morrison said without preamble. My blood went cold. "What?" "We've been monitoring communications from some of your grandfather's old associates. There's talk about revenge, about settling old scores." I sat down hard in my office chair. "What kind of talk?" "The kind that suggests someone wants to finish what your family started. Someone who blames you and Freya for destroying their business." "Who?" "We're not sure yet, but we think it's someone with connections to the money laundering operation. Someone who lost a lot when the federal investigation brought everything down." That night, I called Freya. "We need to meet," I said. "Why? What's wrong?" "Just meet me at our usual place. And Freya, be careful." Our usual place was a coffee shop downtown that had good sightlines and multiple exits. Paranoid habits die hard. When I told her about Detective Morrison's call, her face went pale. "So it's not over," she said quietly. "It might not be. What do we do?" I'd been thinking about that question for hours. We have options. We can go back into witness protection. We can increase our security. Or we can do what we've always done. We can fight back. Freya studied my face. "What does fighting back look like this time?" "It looks like using everything we've learned over the past 6 years. It looks like turning our experience into a weapon." The Blackwood Project had given us resources our teenage selves could never have imagined. We had connections in law enforcement, relationships with journalists, a network of people who owed us favors. More importantly, we'd learned how to be proactive instead of reactive. "If someone's planning to come after us," I continued, "we find them first." The investigation took 3 months. Using our connections and the skills we'd developed, we traced the threats back to a man named Vincent Torelli. He'd been one of Grandpa's business partners, running a construction company that had laundered money for various criminal organizations. When the federal case brought down the Blackwood network, Torelli had lost everything. His company went bankrupt, his son was arrested as part of the conspiracy, and his wife divorced him. He blamed Freya and me for destroying his life. "He's been planning this for 2 years, Agent Rivera told us during a briefing, "waiting for the heat to die down, gathering resources, making connections." "What's his plan?" Freya asked. "From what we can tell, he wants to make an example of you. Show other potential whistleblowers what happens when you cross the wrong people. The smart thing would have been to let law enforcement handle it, to accept protection and wait for Torelli to make a mistake that would put him in prison. But I was tired of being smart. I was tired of being careful. I was ready to end this once and for all. I want to meet with him, I told Agent Rivera. Absolutely not. He wants revenge against us? Fine. Let's give him a chance to take it. You're talking about using yourself as bait. It's too dangerous. Freya leaned forward. What if it wasn't just bait? What if it was a trap? Agent Rivera looked between us. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Vincent Torelli isn't the only person who blames us for what happened to the Blackwood Network, Freya said. There are probably dozens of people who lost money, lost power, lost status because of our testimony. So what if we could get them all in one place? What if we could trick them into revealing themselves? It took 6 weeks to plan. Using our media connections, we announced that we were writing a book about our experiences. We let it leak that the book would include new revelations about the Blackwood Network, names, details, evidence that hadn't been made public during the federal trials. Then we scheduled a private event for concerned parties who wanted to discuss the book before publication. The bait was irresistible. Everyone who'd been touched by the Blackwood case and had managed to avoid prosecution would want to know what we were planning to reveal. The event was held at a hotel conference room in downtown Denver. We told attendees it was a chance for informal discussions about the book's content. What they didn't know was that every conversation would be recorded, every attendee would be photographed, and federal agents would be monitoring everything from the next room. Vincent Torelli was the first to arrive. He was shorter than I'd expected, with gray hair and the kind of expensive suit that suggested he'd managed to hide some money from the federal seizures. Ms. Blackwood, he said, extending his hand. I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. The fake smile didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Torelli, thank you for coming. Over the next hour, 17 other people filtered into the room. Former business partners of my grandfather, city officials who'd taken bribes, lawyers who'd helped cover up crimes. All of them had managed to avoid prosecution during the federal investigation. All of them had scores to settle. I stood at the front of the room, looking out at faces full of barely concealed hatred. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know this book project raises concerns for many of you. A man named Richards, who'd been a judge during my grandfather's heyday, spoke up. Our concern is that you seem determined to destroy the lives of people who've already paid for their mistakes. Have they? Freya asked from her position by the door. Because from where I'm sitting, most of you got away with it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Vincent Torelli's hand moved inside his jacket, a movement that I knew was being watched by federal agents through hidden cameras. Careful, Ms. Blackwood, he said quietly. You're playing a dangerous game. Am I? Because I thought this was just a book discussion. Cut the act, said a woman named Morrison who'd helped launder money through her accounting firm. We all know why we're really here. Do we? I asked. Why don't you tell me? That's when they made their first mistake. Torelli pulled out a folder and slammed it on the table. Because you two are going to destroy this book project, he said. You're going to issue a public apology for the lies you told during the federal trials, and you're going to disappear. And if we don't, then you'll end up like your cousin's parents. The threat was clear, unambiguous, and, thanks to the recording equipment, admissible in court. Judge Richards tried to backtrack. Vincent, that's not what we agreed. Shut up, Torelli snapped. These little bitches cost us millions of dollars and destroyed dozens of lives. It's time they paid. Actually, I said, I think it's time you paid. That's when Agent Rivera and 6 other federal agents burst through the conference room doors. The next few minutes were chaos. Torelli tried to run and was tackled by 2 agents. Judge Richards attempted to destroy his phone before it could be seized as evidence. Several others tried to claim they'd been entrapped, but the recordings were clear, the threats were explicit, and the conspiracy to commit violence was undeniable. As they led Torelli away in handcuffs, he turned back to me one last time. This isn't over, he said. There will always be someone else. Maybe, I replied. But there will always be people like us, too. 6 months later, Vincent Torelli was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit murder and racketeering. 8 other attendees received sentences ranging from 3 to 10 years. Judge Richards lost his pension and was disbarred. The accountant Morrison was sentenced to 5 years and ordered to pay restitution to every client she'd helped defraud. But the real victory wasn't the sentences. It was the message. You showed them something important, Agent Rivera told me after the sentencing hearing. You showed them that victims don't have to stay victims. That people who speak out don't have to spend their lives looking over their shoulders. She was right. The Blackwood Project had received dozens of new requests for help in the weeks following the arrests. People who'd been afraid to come forward were finally finding their voices. But the moment that meant the most to me came a week later, when Freya and I were having dinner at her house. I've been thinking about Uncle Garrett, she said suddenly. I looked up from my plate. We rarely talked about him anymore. What about him? About what he said that night. About how I had no idea what I was doing when I called the police. And, she smiled. Not the broken smile of our childhood, but something fierce and proud. He was wrong. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was choosing to protect myself and other people like me, instead of protecting the people who were hurting us. And now I'm still making that same choice. Every day. With every case we take, every person we help, every corrupt system we expose. I raised my glass of wine. To making the right choice. To making the right choice, she agreed. As we clinked glasses, I thought about the teenage girl who'd stood up at a family dinner 6 years ago with evidence of abuse. I thought I was just protecting my cousin, but I'd actually been starting a revolution. A revolution against the idea that family loyalty meant protecting abusers, against the notion that keeping secrets was more important than keeping people safe, against the belief that some people were too powerful to be held accountable. The Blackwood family code had been simple. Blood protects blood, even when blood is poison. Our new code was simpler. Protect the people who need protecting, no matter who they're being protected from. And unlike the old code, this one was built to last. 10 years later, I was standing in front of the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C., watching Freya walk up the steps to argue a case about mandatory reporting of child abuse. She'd finished law school 3 years earlier and had quickly become one of the most respected advocates in the country for survivors of familial abuse. The case she was arguing would require teachers, doctors, and social workers to report suspected abuse immediately, with criminal penalties for those who chose to look the other way. It was personal for both of us. If mandatory reporting had existed when we were kids, maybe someone would have noticed the signs of what Uncle Garrett was doing. Maybe other children would have been protected. As I watched her disappear into the building, my phone rang. "Congratulations," Detective Morrison said. "I just saw the news about the Blackwood Project winning the National Whistleblower Award. The award was recognition for our work helping expose corruption in over 500 communities across the United States. It came with a cash prize that we'd already decided to donate to organizations supporting child abuse survivors. It feels surreal," I admitted. "You've earned it, both of you." "Have we? Sometimes I wonder if we're just lucky that Uncle Garrett was stupid enough to make those threats on tape." Detective Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? I've been a cop for 23 years. I've seen a lot of people break under pressure, and I've seen a lot of people find excuses to avoid doing the right thing. And what you and Freya did that night, standing up to your entire family, risking everything to protect someone who couldn't protect herself, that wasn't luck, that was courage." After he hung up, I walked to a nearby coffee shop and called Quinn, who was back home in Denver working on a story about corporate corruption in the oil industry. "How's our girl doing?" Quinn asked. "She's magnificent. She was born for this." "And how are you doing?" I considered the question. "I'm proud and grateful and a little amazed that we made it this far." "Any regrets?" It was a question I'd been asking myself for 10 years. Did I regret destroying my family? Did I regret the pain we'd caused Mom and Dad and everyone else who'd gotten swept up in the federal investigation? "No," I said finally. "No regrets." Because the truth was, we hadn't destroyed our family. Our family had destroyed itself generations before we were born. We'd just finally stopped pretending it was something worth preserving. The real family we'd built, Freya and me, our chosen friends and partners, the network of survivors and advocates we worked with, was stronger and healthier than anything the Blackwood name had ever represented. 3 hours later, Freya emerged from the Supreme Court building with a smile that could have lit up the entire city. "We won," she said simply. The vote had been 7-2 in favor of mandatory reporting requirements. It would take time to implement, but within 5 years, every state would be required to have laws protecting children from exactly the kind of abuse we'd survived. That night, we celebrated at a restaurant near the Capitol. Freya ordered champagne and toasted to the end of family secrets. "You know what the best part is?" she said as we walked back to our hotel. "What?" "Uncle Garrett was right about one thing. We really didn't know what we were doing that night." I laughed. And it turned out that not knowing what we were doing was exactly what we needed. If we'd known how hard it would be, how much it would cost, how long it would take, we might never have started. She was right. If 17-year-old me had known that exposing Uncle Garrett would lead to a decade of legal battles, federal investigations, and death threats, I might have chosen silence. But if I'd known it would also lead to this, to laws that would protect other children, to a career helping survivors find their voices, to a life built on truth instead of lies, I would have made the same choice 1,000 times over. "So what's next?" I asked as we reached the hotel. Freya grinned. "I got a call yesterday from a prosecutor in Texas. There's a case involving a family that's been covering up abuse for 3 generations. The local authorities are refusing to investigate because the family has too much political influence." Sounds familiar, doesn't it? They want our help building a case. I felt that familiar surge of energy that came with a new challenge. "When do we leave?" "Next week, unless you're getting tired of this fight." I thought about Uncle Garrett, about Grandpa Blackwood, about all the powerful people who'd counted on our silence to protect their secrets. I thought about the hundreds of survivors we'd helped find justice, the corrupt officials we'd exposed, the children who were safer because of laws like the one Freya had just helped pass. "Never," I said. "I'm never getting tired of this fight." Because the truth was, the reverse I'd played that Thanksgiving night 10 years ago had taught me something important. The most powerful move you can make is the one nobody sees coming, and we were just getting started. 20 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I was sitting in a lecture hall at Harvard Law School, watching Freya deliver the keynote address at a conference on victims' rights. The audience was filled with prosecutors, advocates, and survivors, people who dedicated their lives to the same fight we'd been fighting for 2 decades. "The family I was born into had a code," she was saying. "Family business stays in the family. No exceptions, no outsiders, no authorities." I smiled, remembering the terrified 17-year-old who'd recorded Uncle Garrett's footsteps in the hallway. "But here's what I learned," she continued. "The family you're born into doesn't have to be the family you choose, and the codes you inherit don't have to be the codes you live by." The applause was thunderous. After her speech, we walked across Harvard Yard in the October sunshine. Freya's hair was now streaked with gray, and she walked with a slight limp from an old injury sustained during a confrontation with a corrupt sheriff in Alabama 5 years earlier. But her eyes still held the same fierce determination that had carried us through those dark years in the Blackwood house. "Any regrets?" I asked, echoing the question Quinn had posed to me a decade earlier. "Just one," she said. "What's that?" "I regret that it took me so long to understand that protecting family doesn't mean protecting their secrets. It means protecting their right to be safe and healthy and free." We stopped by a bench overlooking the Charles River. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never spoken up?" she asked. I'd thought about it countless times over the years. If I'd never gathered evidence against Uncle Garrett, if we'd never cooperated with the federal investigation, if we'd chosen family loyalty over justice. "Yeah," I said. "I think Uncle Garrett would have kept abusing you until you were old enough to escape, or until you didn't survive it. I think Grandpa would have kept expanding his criminal empire until someone else brought him down, and I think we would have spent our entire lives carrying their secrets. And instead, we got to help write new rules. Rules that say children matter more than family reputation. Rules that say victims deserve justice even when their abusers are related to them." Freya nodded slowly. "You know what the real Uno reverse was? What? They taught us that family protects family no matter what. But we learned that real family protection means holding each other accountable. It means saying no more when someone you love is hurting someone else." She was right. The card I'd played that Thanksgiving night hadn't just reversed the immediate situation with Uncle Garrett. It had reversed generations of toxic family dynamics. It had turned victims into advocates, silence into testimony, secrets into evidence. It had turned a family built on lies into a chosen family built on truth. The Blackwood Project now operated in all 50 states, with a staff of over 200 advocates, investigators, and support personnel. We'd helped prosecute thousands of corruption cases and supported tens of thousands of survivors. But more importantly, we'd helped change the conversation about family loyalty, institutional protection, and the responsibility of bystanders to speak up. My phone buzzed with a text message from our newest investigator, a young woman named Iris, who reminded me of myself at 17. "New case in Oregon," the message read. 3 generations of abuse covered up by local law enforcement. The family owns half the town. Sound familiar? I showed the message to Freya, who smiled grimly. "Some things never change," she said. "No," I agreed. "But we do. Because that was the real lesson of the Uno reverse. Change is always possible, but it requires someone to be willing to flip the script, to refuse to accept that's just how things are as an answer, to choose protection over loyalty, truth over comfort, justice over family peace." That night, I called my mother. She'd been released from federal prison 8 years earlier, and had spent the time since then working at a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated women find housing and employment. "I saw Freya's speech online," she said. "She's incredible." "She is. And I saw the news about the Oregon case. You're really going to take that on?" "We are." Mom was quiet for a moment. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said all those years ago, about choosing which family to protect. And I think I finally understand what you meant. You weren't destroying our family that night. You were saving the parts of it that were worth saving." She was right. Freya and I were still family. The kind of family that chose each other every day, that supported each other's growth, that held each other accountable for being better. Zane was still family too. He called every few weeks, updating us on his nonprofit work and asking about our latest cases. Even Mom had become family again, in a different way. Not the mother who'd chosen silence and complicity, but the woman who'd learned to choose differently. "I'm proud of you," she said before hanging up. "Both of you. I know I lost the right to say that a long time ago, but I wanted you to know." After she hung up, I sat in my hotel room looking out at the lights of Boston and thinking about the 17-year-old who'd stood up at a family dinner with evidence of abuse. She'd thought she was just protecting one person. She'd had no idea she was starting a movement. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of courage. Maybe revolution begins with a single person deciding that enough is enough. The Uno reverse that had started it all had been simple. Instead of protecting the family from the truth, I'd protected the truth from the family. Everything else had followed from that one decision. And 20 years later, we were still reversing the deck, still changing the rules, still refusing to accept that some secrets are too dangerous to tell. Because we'd learned that the most dangerous secret of all is the belief that family loyalty means protecting abusers. The real family loyalty means protecting the innocent, even when, especially when, the threat comes from within. That was our code now. That was our revolution. And it was just getting started.